Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Deepshika. I am Azure Business Manager with Pax8, and we'll be using the next 45 minutes to cover off how you guys can go ahead and build a business continuity and disaster recovery strategy for your end clients and customers in SMB using Azure. So during this session, if you guys have any questions, then please put that in the Q&A window. I have dedicated time towards the end and I'll try to take them as soon as possible. The whole session is covered. Okay, so let's get started. So essentially on the agenda, I have got first we'll be covering some of the basic concepts of BCDR, right? How you can protect your workloads that's already running in cloud in Azure, or the workloads that are running on premise and how you can protect them with BCDR strategy on Azure to Azure, right? And one of the aspects is security considerations to be taken into account when you're designing and building a business continuity and disaster recovery strategy for any of your end client. It is very important that any business, whether it's enterprise or it's SMB, have a very solid BCDR strategy in place, because today's the direct consequences is impacting the brand name if your business is not available and servicing even for a little time, and you don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper. So those who are new to this or haven't worked on this thing before, essentially business continuity disaster recovery strategy is collection of different tools, processes. It doesn't have to be necessarily of Azure, that make sure that your business is up and running in case any disaster strikes, right? And we have to accept that irrespective of what data center, what technology application you are using, downtime is inevitable, right? It is something that's beyond controls, irrespective of how great latest technologies you are using. You can have downtime due to natural disasters, like maybe cyclone came in the area where you have your data center, a flood entered, or an earthquake kind of situations. Then how do, as a global brand for your business, we make sure that your data is protected, your clients are still being serviced, and you have got the ability to being up and running as soon as possible, right? Um, and these days when disaster strikes, right, we have to kind of make sure that your planning is able to mitigate the losses. The longer your service is not available, it has direct impact on the business revenue, right? And maybe you are out of business as well if it sustains for like kind of longer time. So investing time to build a solid BCDR strategy really secures the business for your SMB clients and customers. Now, before I dig into that, it's very important that we know that there are certain terms in the industry that is being used interchangeably, and at times we feel that, oh, I have got a backup, so I'm covered and I'm sorted. I have got a HA, I don't need a DR site and things like that. We need to understand the clarity, what each of that means, and it's not overlapping, it's all individual strategies to be built around. So first is high availability. To understand, HA is basically a design concentration to be taken into account when you are building an application, where essentially you are spreading your application onto multiple nodes, whether physical or virtual. So if one of the application has failure, you have other nodes to kind of service your clients and application to be still available. And there is a synchronous replication happening between all the nodes. However, when I'm talking about disaster recovery strategy, that means you have got the tools, backup, replication, failover side, there's asynchronous replication and the processes in place to recover the failure. It's not just limited to application availability, it's more wider impact if there is a more catastrophic kind of event and the entire region or your data center is in a gone case situation. So to recover out of it, and business continuity is kind of tools, process, and architecture that make sure that you are able to provide a continuous uptime of critical services during that event and the time you are taking to fix it, right? When you're also building a strategy, you have to kind of design it keeping the end industry, the customer, how much of RPO, the recovery time, how much of RTO they have in mind, how soon, how much time they can afford to be kind of back up and running. Some people can take 24 hours, some can't take like 5 minutes or 15 minutes. What is the RPO RTO you are thinking about and chasing when designing any kind of strategy for your customer? So these are all three things. It doesn't cover each of that. So now let's move on to next thing, which is why does everyone have to protect IT state? I think very common questions, but essentially to look into some of the aspect of it is first thing, data corruption and deletion, right? What if somebody goes ahead and intentionally deletes the data to damage the brand, or by mistake also it gets corrupted or deleted? You put your data on tape backup and it went corrupted, right? So there are also compliance goals associated with it. Sometimes in healthcare industry, you have to really store the client's data or the patient's data for like 10 years mandatory. So if that data is not there, you're non-compliant. How do I make sure I'm able to support those compliance requirements with my BCDS strategy? There are outages that are beyond your control, and how do we protect our data that is heart of any business from it? And the least looked down factor is ransomware attacks, especially when the holiday season comes in. There are ransomware attacks, like you get like $150 kits to kind of even create those attacks and attack somebody. And I have to see how I protect my infrastructure data in case such attack happens, how my backup copies are still protected. Because first thing they go ahead and target is go ahead and delete the backup copies that you guys have got. So when it comes to like BCDR, let's look into BCDR strategies and methodologies there to protect your data. Essentially, it all basic terms, it comes down to where your data is and whether you are sitting in cloud already or you are sitting on premise, right? There are two paths to take in. But if someone thinks because your things are already running in Azure, so you are already protected and you do not need to enable a backup or a DR solution for those or have the right controls in place to configure and protect those solutions, then you're wrong. You really have to think as well for your virtual machines or databases that's already sitting in cloud. How do you protect it, right? So first we'll go into scenario one where protection in Azure. What are the various tools and services in place already on cloud that you can use to go ahead and protect your workloads? The very first things to enable the backup on the machines. You can use Azure Backup Service, which is essentially a cloud native solution, very secure, simple, easy to use, and enterprise grade application, I would say, to enable and take your machines backup on. The beauty of it is that, many a times in on-premise, you next day go ahead and see my backup failed due to um, no availability of the storage or out of storage. But it is quite scalable solution. You never face that situation over there, right? And also think, it has got diverse workload support. So I am running in a hybrid mode. I I I have workload sitting on-prem as well as on cloud, and I need a single solution to kind of back all that up. So you can use Azure Backup, where it protects your Azure VMs, your on-prem servers, if you have servers running in Postgres, like PaaS forms, your HANA VMs, SAP HANA, or just storage you are using, your disk, Azure file. So any diverse workload support is there. And might be there are situations where you want to kind of go ahead and use some other third-party solution to back up and protect those machines. Then you can use like Veeam, Commvault, Acronis. There are heaps to kind of choose on from. Now let's look into if you are using, a trusted partner solution. Highly recommend that you still go ahead and use cloud as your target storage, and there are reasons behind it. First of all, instead of using and putting your backup on tape and shipping it to other location, if you are putting your workload into cloud storage, by default, it will keep at least 3 copies of data. So even if one of the rack in which your data is stored gets corrupted, there are still 2 more copies to recover your data from, right? You get in the blob storage option to kind of tier your data into hot, cool, and archive to save some money there. You can put your partner solution that of your choice, if you are not using Azure Backup, into Azure VM or some other SaaS offering of theirs. and it can go ahead and take backup of your VMs or databases over there. So there are many things to choose from. Depends on your workload, what application you are running, what your team is comfortable and have got skill set, as well as the budget of the client. But it's essential to enable the backup on the virtual machines or any of your solution that you are running on cloud. Right. Now, just focusing back on the Azure backup, this is a slide might look a bit chaotic, but it's trying to say that first of all, um, the solution is quite enterprise grade because it does have diverse workload support. You don't have to use separate solution for your hybrid workloads there. There's a built-in replication when you're using Azure Backup. By default, it gives GRS replication, geo-redundant, and you can switch it to like locally redundant within a data center where you have 3 copies. But if the compliance and regulations demand your data to be replicated to other region of Azure, then you can choose GRS or ZRS, zone redundant as well, depending on how critical your data is, right? But you have the option to be choosing the things that's most cost effective for you. Then there are various access tiers, right? Where you have standard tier, you have got archive tier where you store data for longer duration. Example, healthcare industry, where you're storing data for like, let's assume 10 years. I need not to maybe accessing that data back very frequently. So I put it in archive where you get like 1 terabyte for like $2 there. And the frequently accessed copies and the latest one. And there's built-in security along with it. Not everybody has got access to your data or backed up copies to go ahead and play around with. There are built-in controls for you to use. Maybe just assign a role of a backup contributor, right? Nobody can delete the copies. Data is stored in encrypted format and moved in encrypted format there. And one thing I really like is like soft delete option of it, where your data, if someone goes ahead with a write access, goes ahead and by mistakes or intentionally deletes your backup copies, then Microsoft stores it in Azure for 14 days, right? And if you think, oh no, it shouldn't have been deleted, I need to recover it, you can like recover it from the soft delete section very easily. And it doesn't charge you for like 14 days of storage by default. You don't have to even configure that. You just configure, the backup policies, when you're storing, what you're storing, right? How frequently you want the backup to be taken, right? It's all on consumption model with quite flexible options to choose. And also it has got very strong ransomware capabilities where you can configure the backup center for getting the security alerts around backup, getting the reports, the compliance around backup, right? There are controls like multi-factor authentication, multi-user authentication, like who has access to what level in the backup, assigning the role based. You can create your own custom controls around that. So let's assume even if a ransomware attack happens, and someone goes ahead and tries to delete the copies, it asks for a passphrase key. If not provided, it will not let you kind of go ahead and delete the copy. So your data is still protected while you're fighting off that situation. Then it's about Azure backup pricing. There are a lot of features there, but is it really economical for like my smaller clients who are maybe running just 1 VM out of their business or just 10 VMs? Yes, there are two aspects to the pricing. If we come to, that first is protected instance cost per VM. So let's say I'm just choosing arbitrary number. Let's say $25 per VM cost. If I've got 10 VMs or 100 VMs, that's per instance cost, plus the backup storage cost. If I've got 1 terabyte of disk and that needs to be backed up, so that 1 terabyte of like that storage cost addition to it. So how can I optimize the Azure backup pricing, because it's in consumption and I'm a little afraid, even though I want to use it. So you can optimize the cost for using Azure backup, right? First of all, use Azure pricing calculator to see how many instances you are backing up on-prem or on cloud, so that you get an understanding of the budgets there. You can use selective disk. Yes, there are certain application servers, some database servers, and maybe I want to back up just the data disks, not the OS disks there. So you can select like what terabyte of data or what gigabytes of data that needs to be backed up, right? Choose the right redundancy for your vault's backup center. By default, it's GRS. Maybe you don't need it. You need LRS, or there's compliance goals because you have like you can have up to 6 copies or more, right? So choose the right redundancy because that will reduce the cost. And over the time when you start using it and it's just continuously backing things up, have a 6 months of cycle monthly review. Maybe the copy that is 5-year old or 1-year old or 6 months old, I don't need those backup copies, no longer used to me, or that application is already gone. Just go ahead and delete those copies there. It help you kind of free up some space and gain back a couple of dollars there. And you can move your late redundant data into archive tier. As I mentioned, that's the cheapest storage. Archive tier, you do have the option to move from standard tier to the archive tier when you're backing up into the cloud. So if we have smartly configured it, it can really reduce the cost of backing up things onto cloud for your workloads on cloud or on premise in a hybrid way. Now, what about when I'm protecting to Azure? Most of the situation, many of the clients are still running on premise. They are using Hyper-V, VMware, running on premise servers, and we do not have a DR site. Maybe the business is too small. We never planned to have one. And how can I protect those workloads to Azure, even though they are not sitting on cloud? So the first thing is that those clients can go ahead and use Azure as the secondary, highly resilient failover location, right? In past, people have been like building a second site for the failover location on premise only in some other region or in the same region as well sometimes. But there are certain drawbacks and certain things people don't consider. First thing, when you're having a second site on premise, you're constantly paying for the hardware, the OS, the application, electricity, internet, making sure it's always up and running. And maybe you're lucky and your disaster never strikes, but you're still paying for the entire site all the time, right? Because you need to stay protected and you have to stay compliant. But if you're using or choosing to use Azure as your DR site for failover location, because it's in the model of consumption, it only charges you for resources that are used at the time when it turns into compute. Otherwise, it's always just replicating things in the kind of disk and storage format. But when you have actually failover happens and you start consuming those resources in terms of VMs and network and firewalls, etc., then you get paid. You pay for it. So it is really saving on a lot of facilities, hardware, electricity, cooling, internet, lots of different kind of cost and less management work as well once it's configured. And resilience is definitely kind of built into Azure Fabric. That's there. There are different options by which you can like replicate your on-prem sites to cloud. You can either use an independent software vendor solution. There's heaps to kind of choose from Microsoft side, or you can use Azure Site Recovery, right? That's a native solution. So on high level, the architecture of it looks like this, where we have a heterogeneous environment, right? On the left, Hyper-V, VMware, on-prem. You have got application and web servers, load balancer, application gateway, right? Once you configure Azure Site Recovery, there's an asynchronous replication happening, and there's a replica disk being created onto the Azure site, right? You can automate when the disaster strike, how your servers will come back up. First the database servers and then the web servers, right? You can choose traffic manager to kind of have a automatic failover to the Azure site, or you can do that failover manually as well. It's up to you how you configure, how you automate things, or you keep things manual. But there is a delay, of like 5 to 15 minutes for the server to be back up, and then it's operational while you take time to bring the situation under control in your on-prem site, right? So very easy to deploy, and in tight budgets, it really helps to reduce the overall infrastructure cost for IT. Okay. Now, You can also, extend your BCDR strategy with some other, partner of your choice. Like some people like use Zerto for application where, you go ahead and have your on-prem environment and you put your partner of choice. It goes ahead and on the network, like Azure Express Write or Site Recovery, whatever it is, it copies that into blob storage over there and also helps you configure it. So there are heaps to choose from. You can use the whole concept is that whether if you don't have a DR site in place and just single running in a high availability mode on premise, thinking that it's good to do, then you need to have a second site. Think of migrate, how you can protect in Azure as well as staying compliant along with meeting your industry standards for your client. Hey, now the least third aspect of it, like security considerations. I've seen many videos where we do talk about, do you have backup? Do you have DR? Yes, I do. But what about if some DDoS attack or some ransomware attack hits your system? How do I still protect and make sure operations are still running? So please go back and have a look. Do you have a response plans in place and the right tools in place as well to implement the zero trust framework for your business, right? Are we giving only the amount of access for the time when it's needed to perform the desired job, right? Or do we have full view on the security posture of the existing environment? Do you know what your security score is? Okay. So is that taken into account in BCDR strategy or not? How do we prevent the attackers from getting in? Do you have a SIEM solution or an XDR threat protection solution that helps you to prevent, detect, as well as response in that situation, right? And let's assume attack has happened and it can happen to anybody. What controls I have in place to stop the lateral movement of the attacker into my critical data assets or reaching my SQL servers on network level or on different application level as well, how it has been designed there. So this is also has to be taken in account when we are building, strategizing a disaster recovery kind of situation there. One of the solutions that Microsoft offers, and really, I would say not just enterprise, good for SMBs, is Microsoft Defender for Cloud, because not many of the smaller organizations have a dedicated security team. So you need a solution which is built on AI, have the latest capabilities, have got the ability to automate things where it's needed, and built to protect and handle security proactively rather than reactively, right? So if you have got Defender enabled, it's not Defender for endpoint, it's Defender for cloud enabled on your servers, then definitely it's proactively giving you all the kind of recommendations that can help protect and harden your infrastructure. For example, you didn't update certain server, you have left disk unencrypted, you have left some port open for someone to come in, or maybe some third party person has got still access on your firewall that nobody went ahead and removed. So all those recommendations get listed on certain priority levels, and once you start working on it, it helps you move and harden and improve your security posture. It gives you full stack protection as well as access to vulnerability assessments for your SQL server, your container workloads over there, right? And ability to automate the responses rather than someone acting on it on certain situations. And very well, it blends in with the existing incident systems as well in market. Another thing to take care, because it's quite enterprise solution, so you can extend it to all your workloads, whether you're running it in Azure, in other cloud provider, or sitting on premise, it doesn't matter. It can be extended even though it's a cloud native kind of application. So you don't have to install it on some server, update it and manage it, need a separate team for it, quite friendly to use. Not just one solution Defender that if you have it and it's all good to go. It's important that we have secure network infrastructure and application, right? When we say zero trust framework, that means we are taking into account security on each level. We are taking into account the network layer, the application, the data layer, right? And how we are protecting and making sure things are not getting penetrated further into the deeper layers. For example, on network security, do we have DDoS protection enabled for your public endpoints? What if a flood of traffic is coming in and taking down your application, even though it's sitting on cloud, but we need to have that enabled, right? Do you have firewall for the access Azure Bastion to be used, and also application firewall, web application firewall? So there's different tools that works on different layers and levels to protect. Maybe you're using some third-party things for similar stuff, but do we have those things in place when your building strategy is more important? So certain things to take into account when you're kind of building, designing the BCDR strategy for your end customers, I would say so. If you want to kind of dig in deeper into it, do let me know. We can have like separate session on each of that topic separately. Now, this is like high overview on what is BCDR strategy, right? How you can build, what are the components that you have to kind of look into your existing client's environment. There's few call to actions, I would say, as we are approaching towards the end of it. And before we move into Q&A, please go back, have a look at all your clients, review if they have got a BCDR strategy in place. Many of the people do not have any BCDR strategy happening for the really critical business assets. And if once they go under attack or it go for a downtime, sometime business, they just get out of the market, someone else overtakes it, right? So understand, see if those strategies in place also protect them, the security aspect of it. Is the existing backup copies will be protected from any security attack or no, right? How soon we can bring them back up with the existing technologies in place. If it's taking very long time, then I think it's time to kind of upgrade or look for some other solutions and redesign and relook that, right? Also, please feel free to reach out to your Packside channel account managers if you need help from us and our consultants to help design a BCDR strategy based on your customer needs. We can really help you build one and help you execute on one as well. And last but not the least, something to offer to everybody over here is that we have collaborated with Microsoft, and there are lots of assessments that's available for the partners for free this year, right? If you have got new clients which have not been using cloud and Azure, and we want to kind of get them started on the journey and tell them what's the benefit, how it will look like if they kind of redesign things with cloud, you can definitely submit the nominations for them. On the right side on the portal, you see there's a rapid migration assessment where if you have got 10 VMs or above, or even if there are lesser number of VMs, don't worry, please do raise that with us. We can see how that assessment can be performed. For VMware servers, new AVS Express assessment is there. For overall holistic security posture examine, right? A whole view of cyber security position together, not just M365 or not just Azure, a whole piece of it. We can think of like rapid security assessment with Microsoft as well as Packside, and also Copilot, readiness for the environments where it's more suited. I have put up my email address as well there. Either reach out to your account managers. If you want to reach out to me directly, feel free to just drop me an email anytime. If you're thinking of relooking, examining your existing BCDR strategy, thinking of building one, or do want to do, submit any nominations, and we have a beautiful community of partners in Packside, and we're glad to kind of help you there.